Christophe, you give a brief overview of the work of some people who are not here, actually.
Yeah, so this work has been done by the GSC, and it is about the analysis of EU aid policy on food security in Sierra Leone. So the background is the following. The government of Sierra Leone has asked an EU aid in 2005 from the STABEX Fund. And this EU aid was has a purpose to achieve food security and to improve the performance of the agricultural sector. So it was supposed to be done through two means: the enhancement of the national rice production and the rehabilitation of cash crop production, cocoa and coffee. And most of the initiatives funded under this policy were for crop-specific policies. So it was promotion of crop-specific market participation, support of crop-specific market farmer association, crop-specific agronomic training. So really a focus of crop-specific rice and crop-specific cocoa and coffee plantation. This policy has been assessed by IPTS through a survey done in 2009, so after the implementation of the policy, which was between 2006 and 2009. And the survey concerned 600 smallholders in the two most important regions of the country, agricultural region in the country. So you have the northern region and the eastern region. In the northern region, people will mostly grow rice and food crop, while in the eastern region, you have a specialization toward coffee and cocoa. And you can also note another difference between the two regions, which is that in the northern region, the land availability per capita is much lower than in the eastern region. So you should know that the households were not observed before the policy. So this is a purely observational study which does not allow to identify the causal effect of the policy, but which will allow through the identification of the correlation between net farm incomes and household characteristics to see if the policy was well targeted or not. So the question was, how relevant were these crop-specific initiatives in supporting smallholders to achieve higher net farm incomes? So, given that it was not possible to observe the household before the policy, the impact of these policies are assessed indirectly by considering how smallholders' net farm income vary with more or less diversified crop portfolios. So the idea is that we are focusing on the crop-specific policy, and does it make sense if people are very diversified or very concentrated with respect to their crop portfolio? So this is done through various econometric techniques, but I will skip this part and focus on the results. But first, what is the question? Why do they focus on this question of crop diversification? So there is one reason, which is the fact that the policy is crop specific, but another reason is more general, which is that crop diversification is known to be a key strategy in development economics because of the opportunities it offers. For example, it allows to manage risk and to manage environment with heterogeneous production conditions. It will allow us to generate some income because you can entry into new markets, but only gradually. So it allows a transition from subsistence farming to a more commercial agriculture. And lastly, it has important implication for agricultural biodiversity. So how diversified is crop production in Sierra Leone? Actually, rice is a key crop for the majority of the smallholders that are surveyed in Sierra Leone. But a significant proportion of the surveyed farms present also a very diversified crop portfolio. And actually, the smallholders that are really specialized in crops tend to be the most vulnerable in the survey. So, and this focus on rice specialization seems to be guided by restriction in labor and land access. So people that are not able to diversify actually. And mixed agricultural systems that mix cash and food crops tend to provide higher net farm incomes and consequently higher food security standards for the households. The econometric results show that crop diversification is not a constant predictor of net farm income. In the northern region, where you have more concentrated crops, mainly specialized in rice, the more concentrated the household, the more concentrated the crop, the poorer the household. On the other hand, in the eastern region, the more concentrated the crops, the richer the household. So in the eastern region, you have smallholders that grow more cash crop, and when they are able to specialize in cash crop production, they tend to be richer. So the conclusion is that in the northern region, because of the intensity of the poverty and the food security, you may challenge the relevance of a crop-specific support policy, and especially a policy that was mainly aimed at commercialization. Because when households were focused on one crop, it was mostly because of constraint of the poverty. And in this case, they were quite far from commercialization. In the survey, they asked also subjective evaluation of the Stabex-funded initiative. And the smallholders suggested that it could have been better to have a dual approach involving both the crop-specific commercialization approach, but also an approach that would have increased productivity. But on the other hand, in the eastern region, since there is a bit more, there is more specialization in cash crop production, the Stabex-funded initiative achieved some improvement in cocoa and coffee production, and so had a positive effect on production, marketing, and food security. But clearly, this difference between the two regions is related to the agroecological condition and the specialization in these two regions. So, one question that remains is what would be a combination of measures that would be most suitable to support smallholders in achieving higher income levels and higher level of food security. Actually, the development economics literature offers a great variety of interventions, and most of the time these interventions are not related to crop-specific policies. So they have proposed that two main groups may be identified. There are initiatives to address failures of productions, and these initiatives were not present in this EUL. Most of the initiatives to increase production will be connected to the improvement of natural resources, access to fertilizers, improvement of irrigation facilities. And on the other hand, there are initiatives to address failures of exchange markets, and this was the failures targeted by the Stabex-funded initiatives. So, according to this study, a promotion of a more balanced policy that target both production and marketing would have achieved higher results. So now here is a paper made by Nathalie Ponsferrière and Akiko Suwa from INRA, and that focus on the effect on food and on local market. So there is a debate about the effect of food aid, because food aid has often been blamed on creating dependency compared to some direct agricultural intervention, and so to decrease the level of domestic production. So actually the evidence tend to be mixed. When macro studies tend to find a negative impact with food aid decreasing the level of domestic production, but micro studies on household level, at the household level, tend to find no impact on food aid. So this paper will focus on the effect of food aid in Ethiopia, Ethiopia being a major recipient of food aid. For example, Ethiopia has received food aid every year, and if you break down the assistance of US aid to Ethiopia, you see that 40% of US aid to Ethiopia takes the form of emergency food relief, and Ethiopia represents a very large share of EU food aid. Here you have a plot of the production level in Ethiopia and the level of aid. As you can observe, the aid level has always been very significant compared to the production level, and in some years it was equal to the production. So here we are focusing on the production and aid in wheat. Wheat being the major cereal for aid. It represents 3/4 of food aid given to Ethiopia, and it is one of the major cereal in Ethiopia. There is a market difference after 2004, because after 2004 there is the implementation of a productive safety net project. And what changed at this point was that before 2004, aid was mostly emergency aid, emerging year after year depending on the situation. But after 2004, the productive safety net project planned more regular food aid based on assessed needs and rely less on emergency aid. So this paper will assess the impact of food aid on smallholder wheat production, sales, and purchasing. The point is that in developing countries, rural households that will be recipients of food aid are also agricultural producers. And they have a very heterogeneous participation to market. Some will be net buyers, some net sellers, some autarkic, and so they will have a very heterogeneous response to this food aid. So it's very important to take into account this heterogeneity when studying the effect of food aid. And so they distinguish two effects of food aid. One on the extensive margin, so the decision of household to produce or not wheat, or to sell or buy wheat, and the intensive margin, the quantity of wheat that they will produce once they have decided to produce, or the quantity of wheat they will buy or sell. There are several potential impacts of small farmers. First, if food aid is not additional, meaning that if it does not increase consumption by the level of the food aid, it may induce some sale or reduce buying, and so depress local prices. And the depression of local prices will in turn depress production and further sale. But it can also impact on the market participation status of the household, making them switch from net buyer to net sellers, or autarkic to sellers. It may depend. So the study is made based on the Ethiopian Rural Household Survey, so which is a panel data set which concerns 1,215 households surveyed in 15 villages, and they've been surveyed in 5 rounds. So you have the years here. These villages were represented in the first round of the survey of non-pastoral farming system. It concerned very poor people. Half of the households were poor in the sample, and in average, households were of 6 members cultivating 1.5 hectares on average. So here you have the extensive margin of characterizing this household. You have the proportion of aid recipients, so with around 10 up to 20% of aid recipients, the proportion of producers, sellers, and buyers. And the remaining proportion of households are households that are not involved in the wheat market. So they are not receiving aid, they are not producing, they are not consuming. And it's around 50% of the sample of the households that are not involved in the wheat market. So the empirical strategy is to estimate the impact of food aid on the 0-1 decision to produce or not in each round, and conditional on the decision to produce, to estimate the impact of food aid on the quantity produced. And for this, they need an exclusion variable for the first step. So the exclusion variable that explains the decision to produce or not was the share of religious off days during the planting season. So each year you will have different off days for each religion. So it varies by year, it will vary by household. And so since people tend to follow very seriously the off days and will not work the field, it may affect the planting decision. One of the problems when assessing the effect of food aid on on production is first the selection effect. So the people who receive, you need to control for the observable characteristic of households that determine who receive food aid, because it may also affect the decision to produce. But you need also to control for unobservable household characteristics. And in this paper, this is done using the Pinel dimension. So they introduce some kind of fixed effect by averaging the household characteristic over the Pinel dimension and using them in each round. There is another issue, which is the issue of reverse causality. We could also expect that a low production level could lead to a higher level of food aid. But actually, given how the institutional details that determine the food aid distribution is based on estimation made in the previous year, and this reverse causality is ruled out. So what are the results? They found that food aid has actually an impact on the extensive margin. So it decreases the probability of producing wheat. So an additional 10 kilograms of aid will tend to decrease the probability of producing by 3%. But on the other hand, it has a non-significant impact at the intensive margin. So once an household has decided to produce wheat, whatever the level of aid it receives, it does not affect its level of production. So the effect is actually negative, but not significant. And so this could reconcile the divergence between the macro and micro studies, because here you will have a decrease of the production level at the country level, but for an household that is a producer of wheat and that does not switch between producer and non-producer, you will not have any effect of food aid. In the study, they also find that there is a large impact of market characteristics. So if, for example, there is a market nearby that is open 1 day more per week, the probability of producing will increase by 9% and the quantity by 124 kilo. There is also an effect of the change in the way food aid is distributed. So after 2004 and the implementation of the productive safety net program, which meant also a switch from pure food distribution system to food for work system, there is a decrease in the probability of buying wheat. So in this case, an increase of 10 kilo of aid will decrease by 1.3% the probability of buying wheat. And on the other hand, the increase in the probability of selling wheat with an increase of aid of 10 kilo, increasing by 23% the probability of selling wheat. But there is no impact, again, on the intensive margin. So as a conclusion, food aid has no significant impact on quantities, but has an impact on the decision to grow wheat. And if it's considered at the country level, in 2009, this impact on the intensive margin would have decreased wheat production by 114,000 tons from a total of 3 million tons. So it's a decrease, but it's quite a low decrease, a small decrease in wheat production. And what is also important is to see that market conditions really matter. And the shift from pure food transfer to a safety net program has affected the decision of the households.